Today, Ask the Pastor. Pastor Richard Webb, live from Lutheran Church of Hope, here on The View from a Pew.
Let's get it started. Ha! Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Ha! Let's get it started in here. Yeah.
Let's get it started in here.
Welcome to The View from a Pew, a conversation among Christians who are out to grow their faith by asking the simple questions, the tough questions, and the stuff you really wish your pastor would talk about. Come on now, let's reason together. It's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so join the conversation. Call 855-244-0077. That's 855-244-0077. Now, here's your host, J. Michael McCoy.
All right, 4 minutes after the hour on this 21st day of March in the Lord's year 2014. I'm J. Michael McCoy, and thanks for listening. Love this job. Couldn't do it without you. It's a Friday, and Fridays are always 15% more fun because Maddie's here. But you're the only European in the room now.
Oh, no, I felt,
Last week you had a little
empowered last week.
Yeah, a
with
little commandant there with Pastor Ernie.
Yeah, I did. Yep.
So now you're going to have to behave yourself.
Yep. That's okay. Richard's part German though, so I've got a bit of that.
True.
Yeah.
I was at Leipzig a month ago, so I mean, you know, I can just bring it back.
But you look and sound American. He looks and sounds weird.
That's true. I'm an American.
Yeah. And Bob's not here today because, and I'm not kidding. What'd we say? Oliver Wendell
Douglas.
Wendell Douglas. That's what we're going to start calling Bob. Oliver Wendell Douglas. And if that name rings a bell, that was Eddie Albert's character in Green Acres, because today Bob cannot be here because why? He's making a major testimony in an alcohol case somewhere in the world. B, he's on D-Mort trying to recover bodies. Or C, has a new tractor being delivered to his farm.
A new tractor.
I love that guy. His son and future daughter-in-law are horse people. What do they call those? I was going to say thespians, but that's that's an actor.
That's an actor. Yeah, that's a ways away. Equestrians.
And so mom and dad bought this beautiful horse farm, and they're out there, and they're just having a ball. So anyway, Ryan is producing today, and our special guest is Pastor Richard Webb from Lutheran Church of Hope. And we think we've never gone through the Ask the Pastor questions.
Don't think so either.
Because I think I've always had you in when I've been in some sort of a... I'm stuck somewhere, and so I want you to come in and help me unstuck. So some of these are things I got stuck on, so you'll probably be used to them anyway. But, and Richard, he made me so mad the other day because he contradicted me, and I was wrong.
To do with what?
Oh, no.
One of your Romans? Not one of your Romans?
No. We were doing Ephesians, and we were talking about God's will, and you know me. I think there's two wills. There's God's will, and then there's not. And I don't believe in that little devil on one shoulder and angel on the other, and so I have a will. But he, in front of all my buddies at Lutheran Church, well, no, there's three wills.
Horror of it all.
Oh, so this is what? So our will, God's will, and what? They're the three
The
wills.
accuser's will.
Yeah.
The other two.
And then God's will.
Yeah, and our will.
And our will. And I said that after I surrendered my will to God, I no longer had a will. But he says I got to keep my will no matter what.
I'll use academic speech, and then I'll say real speech. Academic speech, you were speaking existentially. I was speaking ontologically, which means you actually do have a will, but you gave it away.
Yeah, and we talked about it afterwards. Because I have a will, but I gave the proxy to God. But every once in a while...
Saw the paperwork.
I do. Every once in a while, I do take that back, though. So
yeah, that's the bummer
it's
part.
It's not really a proxy.
We all do that.
It's kind of an Indian giver. You can have it, but I want it back right now.
Well, if you die to self daily, you're battling with your will every day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Martin Luther used to say, we may drown the old Adam in baptism, but he's an awfully good swimmer.
Oh, my gosh. That's true. All right. So these are questions that over the years we've collected. And the fun part for us is we've had 100 shows with pastors sitting here, 70.
I don't know if I've done 100 shows, but...
Well, I have.
You have, yeah.
I mean, that's only 2 years worth. And I've been doing this like 15.
Well, there you are.
Yeah.
So it's fun to hear the different answers because there are no Well, Maddie says there's no right or wrong answers. I believe there are some right and wrong answers.
Occasionally there's some just long pauses, isn't there?
Yeah.
Pastor
Well,
Michael.
what we all
Michael
believe is
Hurst.
there's right and wrong, and right is ours. I mean, that's just,
no.
check yourself,
Yeah, the funny thing was when we had Pastor Hurst on one day, and we got to about the third or fourth question, and he just sat there and he didn't say a thing. He just looked at me. What are you doing?
It was great radio, wasn't it?
It was great radio. All right,
man.
so are you the son of a risen king, or are you a sinner?
Yes.
Everybody answers it that way.
I know. Well, and Luther talks about he actually has a fancy Latin phrase for that: simultaneously justified and sinner. And he talks about that we live in two states. There's the state that God has called us into, and then there's the state that we're trying to get used to. So, true, we're a sinner because we've committed certain things. It's a factually accurate thing. We've screwed up. To be a sinner is to wander off the path of life. That's how you would understand in the Old Testament, and that has factually happened to every one of us. Yet on the other hand, God has called us into His love if we trust Him, and He has completely changed the rules of the game. But the point is both are true, and as we just been talking about, the whole issue of will is there's sort of, until we see Christ face to face, there's a war of identities. Our true identity is son or daughter of the king. Our false identity is sinner, but we keep putting on that false identity just like we keep taking the proxy back for the will.
Yeah.
So once again, and the issue here is not to try harder. That will actually backfire. The issue is to remember whose you are.
And surrender.
Yep, it's an identity issue rather than an effort issue.
So when a baby's born, is it without sin?
Interesting you should ask that, because that's a category that's more akin to Western philosophy than the Bible. The Bible simply observes everybody screws up. There is, in other words, to talk about sin as some sort of splotch somewhere on a kid, that's not a biblical way of talking. The way the Bible talks is everybody is misoriented. Everybody is headed in the wrong direction. So I would say the baby is born into a culture, a family system, a way of living that is wrong-headed.
Yeah, we had a pastor on once that says the first time the child says no, then he's sinned against his mother and father.
Except if his mother and father are crazy, then he's just being smart.
That's my grandson.
There you go.
All right.
Good one.
Are we a spiritual being having a human experience, or a human being having a spiritual experience?
Yes. Seriously.
These are not all.
I told him
yes.
they were all right answers.
Well, I mean, and again, you have to. That's not the way, again, the Bible works. But let me take that seriously, because I would probably say that's not the way the Bible works about 6 times, and I want to address why I'm doing that, other than being annoying. It's because
We have Frank for annoying.
Oh,
okay.
sorry.
We have that position filled.
I will compete. I will compete for the job.
All right.
But seriously, again, a lot of times in the questions we ask in our culture and in kind of the West, if you were, is who are you? Where I think the Bible asks more the question, where are you going? So the Bible's less interested about things of are you a spiritual being, are you a human being, and all that kind of stuff. The Bible would more talk about it is, I am created in the image of God, and I live in God's world and God's reality. And it is all spiritual, and it is all human, and it is all material. It's all mixed up together. Spiritual in the Bible is just a code word for God stuff, which is everything, so everything's spiritual.
Okay. So was my spirit, my soul, my whatever, was it something before I became human?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because you don't have a soul, you are a soul. Once again, to the Bible would not say you have a mind, body, soul, or spirit. You are a mind, you are a body, you are a soul, you are a spirit. In other words, those are different facets of the same thing, just as we talk about different facets of a diamond.
Okay.
But they're not separate pieces.
Well, in Genesis, it talks about how God molded man out of the earth, breathed into his nostrils, and he became a living soul.
Right, he didn't get one, he became it.
Became.
Spot on. Yeah.
Okay.
You sound disappointed, Mike.
Well,
You were waiting for the fight? We can pick one.
Well, there's this thought out there that somehow you existed before you existed.
Yeah,
I think is his.
And that's not a biblical story. That the pre-existence of a soul, that notion actually is more an Asian or Eastern philosophy.
Okay.
And that has to do where we all were kind of in this sort of universe that had self-conscious. They call it Atman or Brahman. and different versions of us having pieces of that sort of ooze or that spiritual force falling apart and then acquiring bodies. And that thing then that fell and acquired a body would be the soul that pre-exists. You find that in, like I said, Hinduism, Buddhism. You also find it in Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which, knowing when that movement started, people were just discovering Hinduism, Buddhism, and I think those tenets drifted right into Joseph Smith's thinking because they were drifting into everybody's thinking back then.
Okay. I just always wanted to imagine that I was sitting on God's, lap, and he finally said, "Okay, son, time to go down and be a human, and you won't remember any of this until you return."
And that is exactly the teaching of the Mormon Church.
Oh, great.
No, I mean, you articulated it beautifully.
Go Mitt Romney.
Bravo.
All right, this View from the Pew on a Friday afternoon, 21st day, second day of spring here in Iowa. Our guest today is Pastor Richard Webb from Lutheran Church of Hope, and we're playing, or not playing, we're playing with Ask the Pastor question. So is tolerance the characteristic of a man with no convictions?
Actually, I wouldn't go there. Now you're wandering into very interesting language. You have to define tolerance. If you were to ask someone from the 18th century what tolerance meant, it meant that if I am an Episcopalian, you're a Baptist, we don't kill each other.
Okay.
That's a good thing. You want tolerance if that's the way you define it. There's problems with the word in both directions, so it depends on who uses it. But I would say if tolerance means that we respect each other even when we disagree, then we ought to have it. If tolerance means everybody's right and there's no critical thinking, that's a bad idea. Tolerance is defined both ways, so you always have to ask people, what do you mean by that?
All right. So let's talk culturally for a second. Can we use abortion as the issue?
Sure, go for it.
I think it's horrid. I think it's genocide. Blah, 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 blah. But the law is in place, and I don't shame people who have had one, and in fact, I love on them if they've had one. So am I being tolerant of abortion then? Am I being tolerant of the law? Because if I had my way and it was legal, I'd burn down every Planned Parenthood building there was.
Well, and most Episcopalians in the 18th century, if they had their way, they'd drive the Baptists out of town, and sometimes they did. And then they died in the snow. Actually, that were the Quakers, but details. But the tolerance is a civil word that keeps us from having civil wars every 6 months.
Okay.
So it's a political term. It's very important we don't confuse it with losing our integrity. For example, I am strongly pro-life, and like you, I vehemently oppose using abortion as a contraceptive.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, I know the most powerful way to reduce abortions is to create communities where, regardless of whether a child is conceived intentionally or accidentally, the community welcomes and walks with the family all the way through. So no one would even think of having an abortion because it wouldn't be necessary.
Yeah.
And again, abortions tend to happen in two populations. One is the desperate and the other is incredibly wealthy.
Really?
Yeah. The desperate, obvious reasons. They don't know economically how they're going to feed the kid.
Right.
And so they make a horrible decision, but you can kind of get why, right?
Sure.
The very, very wealthy because they have the money to do it and it's much easier and you don't have to worry about contraceptives and all the fuss and bother. So, and that's the group I have the least tolerance for is the very wealthy who just see it as, kid.
That's our society, isn't it? Because 90% of, relatively, we're all wealthy, aren't we?
Well, I think there's a word that gets confused or mixed in this argument, and it's called acceptance.
Yeah. In other words, I would have tolerance for different points of view, but I don't accept them as my own. But that's a tricky word, too. The word I've been really thinking about this a lot is the word I've been using a lot is agreement and disagreement because they yank all the emotional heat out of it. But I flatly disagree with abortion as a contraceptive.
Yeah.
But I accept people who differ from me, but I don't accept that view.
But there's kind of a wishy-washy church afloat that accepts everything, and we're tolerant of each other, and there's no condemnation or no value judgments, no moral judgments placed on anybody.
And that I would disagree with. And I would also say they're misusing the word tolerance. They're confusing that for saying everything is true.
Pastor Richard Webb is my guest this afternoon as we roll through the important questions on The View from a Pew. If you ever want us to add a question, for heaven's sakes, get a hold of me. Email me, call me, write me, Facebook me, just leave a message at the church, tell my wife. However you want to get it to me, I'd love to add your question to Ask the Pastor on View from the Pew on 99.3 KTIA, Iowa.
Across America, there are countless numbers of people struggling with addiction and other life-controlling issues. Probably someone you know and love. There is a way out. There is hope. Transformations Treatment Center in Delray Beach, Florida, has a unique approach to substance abuse treatment. Call now and ask about our Guaranteed Success program or log on to transformationstreatment.com. Transformations. Change your life. Change your relationships. Transform your world.
Yes, now your favorite programs on Webcast One Live can all be watched and listened to on any Android or Apple device. Your phone, tablet, or iPad. Yes, your favorite shows on Webcast One Live are available live or on podcast wherever you go. Let me introduce to you some of our great shows.
Shalom! Every week on Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman, we'll talk about issues in the Middle East, issues related to the Jewish tradition and religious traditions in general, and keep you up to date on exactly what's going on around the world. You may know some of the story, but you haven't heard all of the story until you've heard it on Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman and our special guests we have on every week.
Hey, this is Doc with Doc and Lefty. I want to tell you about our brand new time slot. It's from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. It's on the same night, Tuesdays. We now follow Ed Fallon and the Fallon Forum on webcast1live.com. I want to tell you a little bit about our show. Our show is focused on local, state, and national, and sometimes international politics. We like to keep people updated and informed. We also have very interesting guests. So please join us every Tuesday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. on webcast1live.com.
So when you want to watch your favorite Webcast One program, remember, there's an app for that. You know, there's an app for that.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Get away from us, you mean old credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Help! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray! We're saved! Consumer Credit! You're our hero!
We've got questions. You've got the answer. Join the conversation. It's your voice we want to hear. So call 855-244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
21 minutes after the hour on the 21st. Oh, look at this, guys. Right now, it is 3:21 on 3:21. See, that's what a digital world brings you. It's 3:21 p.m. on March 21st. Three. Okay, doesn't mean anything.
Not bad. I'm impressed.
I just think it's
Thank you
fancy.
for sharing me out.
And that happens once a year. No, happens twice a year. This morning and now.
This is true.
It'll never happen again until next 3:21.
Mm-hmm.
That's a stupid thing to say, Mac. Okay.
A moment of silence, please.
Well, or as my wife would say, when I say I'm wrong, she writes it down someplace. Mac said he was wrong. Should I ask him the big one now, or should I hold it?
Whenever.
Well,
Sure.
Let it loose. Come on.
Go on. Yeah, go on then. Yeah.
Just right now?
Yep.
It would now be mean if you didn't.
I don't know if it's that big a question.
Be okay with you, Frank? If I ask, we're going to skip to the big one then here. I mean, we may never talk about anything else the whole hour.
Do we cue drum roll and all that?
Yeah, let's go
Okay,
with it.
drum roll, please.
This is not going to be the long question answer.
Do you, Richard Webb, have a relationship with the accuser?
Yes, and a relationship with God.
I got it right. So somebody who flares back at me, no, I don't have a relationship with the accuser, that's wrong.
I would say I'm very nervous for you. You're going to get blindsided. And what do I mean is, then, in all honesty, you have to get a little more precise. You have to say what kind of relationship. I have an adversarial relationship with the accuser. Sometimes, though, I get co-opted.
Yeah.
But I have an unconditional love relationship with God, not because of me, but because of Him.
Yeah. So, do you take the accuser seriously?
Very.
Should we take him as serious as we take God?
No. In fact, sometimes we need a lot of humor when we look at the accuser. The accuser has sort of three basic tools in order to insinuate himself into our lives. The first one, I would say, is intimidation, where if he can get us frightened of him enough, then he can push us around. The second one is seduction, where if he can look like God or look like a counterfeit, or sort of make false promises that we'll get what we want if we follow him. And he has all kinds of clever ways, so we can even deny we're doing it. The third one, though, is if he can get us to think he doesn't exist. C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Screwtape Letters, refers to all three. The key, obviously, then, is to anchor yourself deep in the truth of who we're dealing with. There's a fourth one, too, where if he can get us to think that everything we do wrong is because of him, then he knows that we won't deal with it because we think it's all his fault. So
that's the way I think.
Exactly. The problem is it's also our broken selves, and we can do things. We can take ourselves down just fine without his help. I wanted to allude to the issue of humor, especially when people are feeling afraid of the devil. John, in the book of Revelation, uses a ton of humor to describe the devil. In one case, the devil looks like a really frightening beast until you look really carefully and realize he's been put together by committee. Another place, he looks like he's an old doll with the stuffings falling out and gets all pooped because it all tired because he can't chase God's people and he just runs out of air. Sometimes I tell people when they're afraid of the devil is just imagine him as a kid throwing a fit with a bunch of Pampers on. In fact, I'll use that shorthand when someone goes, "Oh, I feel spiritually attacked." I'll go, "Oh, so the evil one's wetting his Pampers over you or something." And people go, "What?" And I say, "Yeah, he's basically throwing a fit."
Well, I saw a statistic in 1975 that said 46% of professed Christians don't believe in a literal devil. So I liken what you just said and the analogy you just gave to a fisherman and a three-way hook. It is little difference to me which barb my fish gets caught on. And it's the same thing with Satan. He don't care if you don't believe in him outright. He's misportrayed to you as he's taking credit for what God done and giving God credit for his things. He don't care if some people believe he's the Hollywood version, the scales and the hooves and
He's basically a psychopath who thinks he can take God down and take a bunch of people with him in the way through, and he got an ego the size of Cincinnati. Again, I think the solution to all three of those is to anchor yourself in God's truth. When Jesus said to his followers, "Who do you say that I am?" That's the question we need to constantly press: is who is God? What's his character? What has he done? And what's he going to do?
All right. So here's the position that I took. That helped me get in line for Jesus to mug me. And that was that I realized that the self-speak in my head was his voice. I had fallen for the same thing that Eve had. And that if I heard God's self-speak, I'm an incredible son of a risen king. I am loved. I can do no wrong. He loves me all the time unconditionally, and I'm an amazing father, son, husband, et cetera, et cetera. When I was able to learn that, that's when I kind of went to there's God and there's everything else.
And that's a good perspective too.
And I'm either with God as much as I can be, or I'm the other. And therefore, but see, I'm contradicting what you just said because there is no me anymore. I either do his will or I do the devil's will.
No, once again, we talk about proxy. You've got a me, you've just proxied it over.
Say that again?
Just as with your will, God made you with a you. Just like he made you with a will or a choice, but you have gladly proxied it over to the guy who really knows what he's doing with it.
Okay.
And it's the same thing. Is I don't like to talk so much about who I am, but whose I am.
Yeah, right.
But I still have a me. I've just titled the deed over to God. But again, like you, I tend to get fancy lawyers to take it back a lot.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the constant struggle. Is I keep giving the property to him, and then I keep taking it back every time I want to.
Well, as I mentioned last week, if Satan disappeared tomorrow, sin wouldn't go away. We would still rebel.
Yeah. Well, the reformers talk about, I guess I'd call it the unholy trinity: sin, death, and the devil. And in other words, one way or the other, we take the world out, left to our own desires. And I frankly think that the devil doesn't have to work too hard to make a mess of things. There's been a lot of theologians who've thought about the interplay between our own evil inclinations and the devil's actions. And frankly, it's fuzzy, but the consensus is all the devil does is kind of push us a little bit in the way we want to go anyways. So the devil is not coercing anybody to sin.
Somebody once told us in a question, and just thinking about it out loud. Somebody once told me that you can call something your idol or an idol of yours when you take something from that idol to help you create your identity.
I think that would be true. Philosophically speaking, a god, little g, is anything you derive identity, security, and meaning.
Okay.
So what makes you feel good about yourself? And you can be the bottle. It can be a credit card. It can be food. It can be TV. It can be sex. It can be the internet. It can be other relationships. It can be work. You pick it. What makes you feel good about yourself apart from God is an idol. And in addict's language, it would be self-medication, right?
Right, yeah.
And in fact, more and more people are discovering that sin, by its nature, is addictive because idolatry is wrapped up in practically everything.
Sure.
Well,
I went through that battle a year ago when I went to buy another car, and I've driven a certain brand of car for 20 years, and I have to admit, one of the reasons I drove that kind of car was when somebody said, "Oh, look, he drives and there's a something that goes with that. There's a impression, an identity." But what's the difference? I mean, you carry an iPhone and I carry an Android, and we both judge each other because of that.
Yes,
he's a geek.
You will burn in hell for that, but details.
Could you say that? So it's connected with. So when these things that you like define who you are, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and it's subtle because what I don't want to be is suddenly anti-pleasure, where because God made things for us to enjoy as well.
Right.
And we got to be so careful we don't all start saying, if you enjoy it, it must be sinful. That's just bizarre. But the quickest way to figure out an idol is if you stop doing it, or you take it away, or you get rid of it. If you get anxious, you got an idol on your hands.
Well, there's a difference between enjoying life and serving.
Yeah. And so for me, that would be the test is can you stop whatever activity? Can you get rid of that possession? Can you interrupt that relationship?
What if you just get a really good deal on the possession?
Well, there is that, as long as you tie 10% to hope. No, kidding.
But I'm still struggling with that, Matt.
But wouldn't we all miss things we like to do? So if I give up soccer,
missing's okay, but let's say I want to shift examples. If there's someone who's working out for, let's say, 4 hours a day.
Right.
He's talking about me now, folks. Listen up.
7 days a week.
You did it for 2 days.
Yeah, exactly. Not only that, but their relationships are dominated by their workout schedule. Their commitments go second to their workout schedule, and it's messing with their family. I mean, I'm trying to pick as blatant as one, but not one that's obviously addictive, because working out is a good thing. But someone has taken a good thing and now they've turned it into something that defines them.
Okay.
And let's say for some reason they got sick and couldn't work out for a week, and so they became a wreck, and they were just impossible to be with until they could return to their workout schedule. Now we got an idol.
So their God is vanity.
Yeah, and another way of putting it is, if they don't fit the image they think they need to fit, and we're talking about vanity, is then they go into fits of anxiety. Ultimately they worship themselves.
But okay. So I grew up in a family that sold horses and buggies, and then sold Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury until I was 40. So automobiles have always been a source of something. My dad said, keep them clean, drive nice, da-da-da-da-da. So one of my issues is the automobile. So, but if in return I bought a 1980 Honda Civic that was all rusted out and had no hubcaps and hardly got down the road, that also says something about me to other people too.
Oh, then your idol is your self-righteousness. I mean, if you're doing it to show what a virtuous person you are, you still have an idol. You've just switched idols.
Okay.
I mean, and really, it isn't the car. Like you said, it's a different issue, isn't it? You know, and so half the time with idolatry, the issue is not the issue. So whether it's, you know, your gleaming luxury car or your car that can barely make it down the block, if you're buying them to make a point of identity of who you are, it's already down the wrong road.
Okay, let's get really personal with me. What about this show for me?
Depends.
I mean, go ahead.
No, seriously, and I'll bet if you have a pulse, it's a mixed bag. And since you do, it is a mixed bag. In other words, I don't think anything we do until we see Christ face to face will be empty of idolatry. I stick my ego in all kinds of things, my music, my preaching, my teaching, my ability to lead, and I'm constantly having to get clean with God and say, there's my ego again. There I was bummed because people didn't give me enough positive comments after I taught, or you know what I mean, on and on and on, and I'll catch that, you know, and then I'll even catch myself trying to be the perfect Christian when there's one more idol.
Yeah.
You know, so at that point we're with the Apostle Paul where he says, "Wretched man that I am, who will save me from this body of death?" Because everything I've got has got mixed motives in it.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
It seems to me, though, that a lot of people who have addictions just change an addiction.
Oh, absolutely.
They give up one and they take up another, and they don't even understand it because they have an addictive personality.
In fact, in the AA community, it's called a dry drunk.
Yeah, right.
Pick your bottle. That's another saying. I remember I had a friend of mine who was teaching a community that was struggling with addictions, and it wasn't alcohol, but what he did is he had these people, as they were processing through the particular addiction they were experiencing, sign something that said, "During this time, we will not drink." And then he got up there and he said, "Why are we not going to drink for the next year or whatever?" He says, "Not because I have anything against alcohol, but because your temptation as you quit this one behavior will be to find another one."
Yeah. All right, we're doing Ask the Pastor. Pastor Richard Webb from Lutheran Church of Hope's here. I like that. That's good. We're going to talk about some other things, including, well, I'll give you a hint. Predestination. Bum, bum, bum. Maddie's in the house. Frank's in the house. Ryan's producing. Richard Webb's here. I'm Mac. Thanks for listening. Love this job. Couldn't do it without you. Right here. Powered by webcast1live.com. This is KTIA, Iowa.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershide.
I'm administrative manager.
I am the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
You know, if we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, you know, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotta be, it's your home.
You know, it's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're gonna do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's gonna be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're gonna do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed right or it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
I mean, if you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you gonna say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're gonna be listening. They're gonna wanna know what your challenges are. Then they're gonna come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you know, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me, but is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going, though. I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm going to take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed right or it's free or 100% money back.
enough said.
We're the ones in the pew, not pulpit. Come on now, let's reason together. The phone lines are open, so call 855-244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
22 minutes before the top of the hour, Salem Radio Network News, and then Pastor Michael Mudloff with True Blue from Westkirk Presbyterian Church. My guest today is Pastor Richard Webb from Lutheran Church of Hope. Maddie's in the house. Frank's here. Ryan's producing. Predestination. You're teaching in Ephesians right now, and it's talking about it, and I'm in the middle of Romans, and it's all over it. And Maddie and I have a favorite pastor that we enjoy listening to, and one of his sermons is all about predestination. Just tell me about it. What should I know as a Christian about what Paul writes in these letters about predestination?
Well, let me first of all start out with where the concept came from. And I'm going to go back to the way Jews thought about predestination rather than the Reformers. The Reformers, especially Calvin, used Aristotle to understand predestination. And in my humble opinion, I think he made a mess of things. I also think that the Wesleyans were wrong by reacting against it and overemphasizing free will as well. But if you were, the Bible works predominantly in story rather than idea. So if you were to ask a rabbi, in ancient Israel, well, there weren't any rabbis, in later Israel, what is predestination? The rabbi would say, let me tell you a story. So the first thing he would say is, when Abraham and Sarah met God, when God invited Abraham to start this brand new nation, it was pretty clear God had thought a long time about issuing that invitation. He had plans. So God had thought ahead of time about what he did. And then he acted on it. And he didn't even give Abraham and Sarah a choice. He just said, come on, go. And off they went, even though it was a pretty messy deal. So they were literally predestined, not in some fancy philosophical way, but it's just another way of saying God thought about it and did it. Predestination also acted itself right on the ground where God just got right down and dirty with them, said, come on, follow me. The same thing is true if you go to the Gospel of John, where it's very clear that when Jesus starts calling his disciples, he thought about it ahead of time and just started calling them. So predestination literally means that God has intentionally gotten into your life, called you a different way, and then this is the very most important thing. Why were you predestined? For an assignment. And this is really important because a lot of people think they're predestined for privilege and entitlement, in other words, a fancy afterlife. No, you're predestined to be the vehicle that God wants to share his love and call someone else.
Yep.
So it's as if I basically hand you a letter and say, can you go put that in the mailbox? I predestined you to carry a letter to somebody.
All right, so did God predestine everybody?
And this is where it gets interesting because the Bible contradicts itself, but it's true. This is interesting because... And this is why all the Reformation thinking on predestination gets so messy, because they don't let the Bible speak. The Bible says two things that don't agree, but I think they're true, not only biblically, but in human experience. Number one, those who follow Jesus are there exclusively, total, completely, and absolutely by the call of God, and nothing they have done, not even their choice got them in.
Not even saying the sinner's prayer.
Nope.
Okay.
Those are all signs that something happened, but they didn't do it.
Okay.
Right.
Now, flip side, when the Bible talks about people who do not trust God, who do not trust Jesus, it's very clear it's of their own free will, their free choice, their volition that they have done this. This is not logically consistent, but it's true.
So Wesley was vehemently taught against the antinomian teachings of the time, that somehow morals change as society changes, that there's no eternal law. And part of that antinomian teaching was also teaching against the fact that the elect felt that there was nothing they could do to transgress God's law.
Exactly, because once you're in, then you're in. Although, here's the problem with either going both to the free will side or the predestination side without the biblical kind of middle position, is if you're trying to make it make sense, you get to pay for it. So if you're on the free will side, you always wonder if your decision took. Were you committed enough, faithful enough? And so there's always this thing is, was it something enough that got me in? Because it was my effort. That's free will. On the predestination side, you don't escape that, because what the predestinations say, in order to avoid what you raised, is, well, it's by your fruit you shall know they're elect.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I grew up on. I was terrified I wasn't elect, because I always saw my mixed motives, and when I had a bad day with my parents and I wondered if I was truly saved because I was disobedient to my parents, that if you're disobedient, you don't inherit the kingdom, and off you go. And every time my parents were gone and I didn't know it, I thought I'd been left behind at the rapture. And this was a church that taught rigorous Calvinism. So both schemes create a mess where, and I love this is simplistic, but if you want to know where your destiny is, don't look to yourself, don't look to some predestination scheme, don't look to your will, look to Jesus. What does he say?
Believe upon my name and ye shall be saved.
Yeah. So do you trust it? Cash the dang check. End of subject. Quit speculating philosophically.
But it says in the Bible that God ransomed himself for all.
Absolutely, which means it's his desire. See, God is a universalist. The problem is we aren't. There's a mystery in the Bible. There's a bunch of people who don't want to go where God is, ever. And because he's not a jerk, he created space for that. He calls it real hell. And he's trying to talk everybody else into believing the same thing so they won't go there.
Well, I always say that God calls everybody, not all accept the call.
And that's a shorthand for that. Yeah.
Yeah. What's that old saying? The qualified aren't called, the called are qualified. Uh-oh.
I got to think that through. No, it's a true statement. I think it deals with a different subject, though.
Oh, okay.
In other words, if God calls you to a task, he'll equip you for it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't wait for you to have all the tools ahead of time.
But nobody surprises God. He doesn't wake up one morning and go, "Holy Toledo, Maddie accepted me."
Yeah. How did that happen?
Well, Abraham stepped out in faith, and his faith was counted to him as righteousness. He didn't know where he was going.
No, off he went.
And off he went.
So what I like what you said, and this is in that sermon we listened to as well. It's not just about conversion. There needs to, you're tasked with something. God is doing this for not just for conversion. Doesn't that? I don't want to say has, but he has a purpose greater than that.
And this is so important. And this is where we get really wild. And you got to stop us if we go too far afield. Is what were we called into? And right now, most Christians think it's to a really nice afterlife. Glen Oaks in the sky.
I don't like Glen Oaks.
Well, there you are. See, you're already in the right spot.
Glen Oaks in the sky.
I could have bought into Glen Oaks 20 years ago, and I didn't. Why do you keep throwing it in my face?
Well, the problem is that's not what Jesus called people to do. He called them into heaven right at that very moment. What did heaven look like? Following him. And he created also a community of heaven. What did that look like? All these people behaving differently than everybody else because he was shaping them into a very different way of living. So what we have been predestined, called into, equipped for, is to partner with God in the kingdom of God. He doesn't need us at all, but the amazing thing is he desires us in the kingdom to partner with him, and one day the whole earth will be flooded with that kingdom as the waters cover the sea.
I've always thought that it was a reasonable theory to debate that not recognizing your creator is a mental disorder. That there's something wrong, there's biologically something wrong with somebody's brain when they can't connect to the person, to their creator. Not the person, but the creator.
I would say that I think there's many ways to say the same thing. I'm not sure that you could biologically prove that. But I think from God's perspective, not living in his love, being defined by his grace, is somehow crazy.
Yeah.
And he's, and I want to say this more poetically than really meaning it as a biblical doctrine. I sometimes wonder if he's just as puzzled as everybody else is when someone refuses his love. Like, why wouldn't you want to have this love?
Yeah.
It's life.
Yeah.
And again, that's not in the Bible, so I don't want to create a new doctrine.
Right.
But there is a sense of puzzlement in Scripture for those who refuse God's love. And even Paul puts that in. Even while he's being hard and tough in Romans 1-3, there's a degree of puzzlement. Like, why would anybody go down that bad road?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he came from that bad road.
Yeah, he did. But I think he regards it as a kind of insanity.
Yeah.
And that's I think very important for us to understand is we are so broken and so banged up that we're kind of insane until Christ makes us sane.
Well, I'll agree with that.
Dallas Willard put it in a very humorous way. He said our wanter is broken.
Yeah, you said that the other day. I like that.
Yeah.
Our wanter is broken.
Yeah.
Because we want the wrong thing.
Bingo.
All right, we're going to take our last break, and then when we come back, 2 or 3 questions left for Pastor Richard here on a Friday on View from the Pew. Ask the Pastor. 3:47 on the 21st day of March. Thanks for listening. Love this job. Couldn't do it without you. Right here on 99.3 KTIA Iowa, powered by webcast1live.com.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live. Hey, psst. Let me let you in on a little secret. You ready? Always try to do business with people, not places. Especially if you seek honest Christian business people. And when it comes to my car, I really need to trust who's working on it. Now, my family is so blessed. A few years ago, we found a family-owned automobile repair shop that operates as a Christian business also. Open, honest, reliable, trustworthy. It's AMCO on Hickman Road in front of Kmart, and it's a family-owned Christian operating business. This family treats your car as if it was their car. Everything from oil changes to transmission repair and everything in between. So the next time you feel the need to be at peace with your choice of who you can trust with your car, give AMCO on Hickman a chance to serve you. And tell them Max sent you.
All across America, there are countless numbers of people struggling with addiction and other life-controlling issues. Probably someone you know and love. There is a way out. There is hope. Transformations Treatment Center in Delray Beach, Florida, has a unique approach to substance abuse treatment. Call now and ask about our Guaranteed Success program or log on to transformationstreatment.com. Transformations. Change your life. Change your relationships. Transform your world.
We've got questions. You've got the answer. Join the conversation. It's your voice we want to hear. So call 855-244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
10 before the top, Salem Radio Network News, and then Pastor Michael Mudloff with True Blue coming up. Richard Webb, Pastor Richard Webb is here from Lutheran Church of Hope, and of course, Frank, the voice. Frankly Speaking Live this afternoon at 5:30 here at Webcast One Live. What are you going to talk about today?
That's a trick question.
No, it's not.
Well,
the answer is either this or I haven't figured it out yet.
I've got a couple of things that preliminarily I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, I haven't figured it out yet. That's the answer.
That's his answer last week, too.
Yeah, that's right. That's what he said last week.
No, I said I was going to talk about Bill de Blasio last week.
Oh, you did.
Maddie is in the house. And, okay, so can someone, Pastor Richard, accept Christ into their heart, never tell anybody, never go to church, nobody would ever know that he's accepted Christ, never read his Bible? Is that a Christian?
Interesting the way you put the question. I would say, can someone follow Jesus without following Jesus?
Well, can someone be a Christian all by themselves?
I would say that's really, really difficult, since what it means to be a Christian is to be part of a community of Christians.
Yeah.
And again, I think behind that, and the reason people ask that question is, if I pray this prayer, can I go to Glen Oaks in the sky?
Yeah.
And if we reframe the whole thing, then obviously then it gets absurd real fast. Can I follow Jesus without knowing Jesus, knowing his story, knowing his people, or knowing what he wants? No, that's absurd.
Yeah.
Well, somebody give me the analogy one time. It's like coals.
Mm-hmm.
You can separate yourself as a hot coal, but you'll burn so long and burn out. Mm-hmm. You associate yourself with other hot coals. Generally, you're going to stay motivated, warm, hot.
Mm-hmm. In fact, Luther pushed that so hard, he had the phrase in German, ein Christ, kein Christ. In other words, a Christian alone is no Christian at all. Because he felt that community was the primary place we experienced God's presence, heard God's word, received his presence in the Lord's Supper, and also grew together because we spoke the word to each other just in the normal course of our daily lives.
Pastor Johnson, David Johnson, who's on staff at Lutheran Church of Hope, had the best answer ever, didn't he?
What was his answer?
Just as quick as you've said, like yes and no on some of them, he said, well, yes, he's a Christian, but he's not an obedient one.
Yeah.
And I love that answer. That was a great answer. All right. I know what the answer to this is, but I'll ask it anyway. Is Lutheran Church of Hope a cruise ship or a battleship?
Interesting. I never thought of it in those terms.
Or is it just an ark who's collecting all the people?
I don't know if I'd use that one, because if you're going to say that, then there's tons of arcs here in Des Moines. I would say it's one piece of a really, really large flotilla.
Well, that reminds me of Mark Jacobs the other day when we were interviewing him, and we said, "How do you feel about marriage in America?" And he said, "I like it."
Big thing.
What's that mean?
Sometimes that's the best answer.
Well, I've done some reading on this subject this week, and I read some story about Luther and his helper Melanchthon.
Yeah.
And they're quite an interesting story. And what I was reading was talking about the relationship. It was very similar to the relationship between Peter and the beloved apostle John.
Yeah.
John was the youngest apostle. He was the one that allowed himself to be most molded like the character of Christ. All the other disciples wasn't.
Yeah.
And I read something very interesting that said that the message wouldn't have got delivered just based on John's efforts alone. It took Peter's zeal. It took his fire. It took his impetuousness. God sanded those edges down. He sanded those rough edges down, but he left Peter's character intact.
Absolutely.
And that's what it took to build the church. Now John was good for saying, hey, look, remember you denied him 3 times. And this relationship between Luther and Melanchthon was quite the same. Luther was full of zeal for the Lord. He was full of energy for the Lord. And Melanchthon tempered him.
Do you have a question, or are you just pontificating?
Pontificating.
Okay, good.
But he's right.
Well, Frank's always right. Why are you a Christian?
Why am I a Christian? Because basically I was going a certain way, and Jesus mugged me with his love and stole my wallet of sin, and what else was I going to do?
Okay, yeah, that's the answer. This is a trick question. When were you saved?
When Jesus died on the cross.
Love that answer. Okay. If your sibling, well, let's just choose me. If I don't go to heaven, are you going to know it?
I would assume so. The Bible's silent, but I would guess so. And there's an interesting thing. This is speculation, but it says in Revelation, and it also says in another spot in the New Testament, that when God restores all things, he will wipe every tear from our eyes. And I think part of that's just the grief of the world that he will take away, because he repairs everything and heals it. But I think, like God, we will grieve those we care about who have chosen not to be with God, because we'll think they're nuts.
But then that means there's sadness in heaven.
Well, except that apparently God takes it away ultimately. In other words, it's not the last word. And I'm not worried about there being sadness in heaven, because in Revelation, people get sad a lot in the kingdom of God. I mean, they're upset at the injustice that's going on in the world. They're upset at people dying. God got so upset, he died himself.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, I'm not sure it's a biblical doctrine to say we won't be sad, because the promise is God will heal our sadness, but it doesn't say there won't be any in the first place.
Would you agree when we get to heaven, we will see people there that we think should be there, or we'll see people there that we wouldn't have thought would be there, and we'll see people there who we wouldn't have thought would be there in a million years.
Oh, heck yeah. I expect to see a ton of Mormons there.
So what I'm saying is there's likely to be some sadness in heaven for people who we love here on earth who've not made it.
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. And I would probably refrain rather than have not made it like it's an achievement, but more the people have refused. And I know that's a side point, but it's just because heaven's not earned. But I also think we will be just very sad that someone will be oriented in their life so much that they would choose something else.
But that's like we should be now for people. That's how we should feel for people.
And that's the point, because just as heaven starts now, so does hell.
All right, last question. What Bible character does Frank remind you of?
Oh my! I have to think for a while. I don't know if I can answer that in probably the 2 minutes you
Is
have
it a
left on the show.
loquacious one?
What Bible character do you remind yourself of?
Oh my! I would say either Luke or John, just because I like the way they write their books.
Yeah. And what about Maddie?
And now, yeah, see, I can kind of figure it out for myself, but I'd have to think about that for a second.
Who was the jester that Moses had hanging around? No, not Moses. Pharaoh. Didn't he have some jester?
I don't want to Pharaoh.
No, he had a bunch of court priests, but I don't think Maddie would qualify as a court priest to Pharaoh. I don't think he'd wanna.
Okay, all right. Thank you so
you're
very
totally
much
welcome.
for being here. It was a great time. And Frank, thanks for taking up all the time on the air. We'll
Come
talk
on,
later.
he behaved.
Okay. Maddie, thanks for being here. Ryan, thanks for producing. And until I see you again, do me a favor. Think of somebody you don't like. Think of somebody you can't stand. Think of somebody that you just can't imagine ever being with for 1 minute ever again in this life. And pray for them. Forgive them. See you Sunday.